Welcome back, Exalted Ones. Here we are with issue 77. We're going to review this and see what we think. So first thing we're going to go over is the Finalizer, the First Order Flagship. The long arrow-shaped Star Destroyers had become the backbone of the Republic fleet during the Clone Wars, but after the rise of the Galactic Empire became one of the most feared symbols of the Emperor's terror and oppression. The arrival of even a single Star Destroyer was an ominous sign for any hoping to make a stand against the Empire, and few of Palpatine's opponents lived long enough to tell of combat with such a behemoth. When the remnants of the defeated Galactic Empire, later to become known as the Old Empire, banded together to form the First Order, there was no doubt that the Star Destroyer would remain a central part of its fleet. In its secret factories in the unknown regions, the First Order worked with Kuat in Tralla Engineering, one of the many new mega manufacturers that had survived the Military Disarmament Act, by merging to develop a new class of Star Destroyer. This new model was so large that it was classified as a battle cruiser, a designation for ships that were larger than Star Destroyers but smaller than Star Dreadnoughts. We're going to talk about this. Usually this section up here is not quite as significant. It's usually shared throughout, but this one wasn't. One of the secrets dating to the Imperial era that the First Order has been keen to exploit from its bases and factories in the unknown regions, far out of sight of the New Republic, is the use of kyber crystals and large-scale weaponry. The Finalizer's weapons are strengthened by kyber focusing crystals, boosting their power and recharge rates. With military-grade crystals a rare sight, kyber-powered weaponry remains a privilege for only the most important ships in the fleet, hence its use on General Hux and Kylo Ren's flagship. So there you go. Kyber crystals, pretty interesting. If you understand, and maybe you might have needed to read the book leading up to Rogue One. They used kyber crystals for the Death Star, so it has some significance there. But yeah, so there you go. All right, let's move on. Lessons from the past. The new model, named Resurgent Class Star Destroyer, is a true Leviathan, measuring close to 3,000 meters long, almost twice the length of an Imperial Star Destroyer. The class is in many ways similar to the older Star Destroyers of the Emperor's fleet, featuring a familiar triangular design with an asymmetrical bridge in an elevated position, but has the distinctive appearance of almost being made up of a smaller Star Destroyer attached to a larger one. You can kind of see that here because it's got like these different levels. So yeah. An earlier ship, the versatile Clone Wars era Venator class, was the inspiration for the dorsal flight deck, prominent keel and side hangars, each of which had a specific flight control bridge to oversee arrivals and departures. The Resurgent's larger main hangar is joined to a sizable ventral docking bay with a reception bay for welcoming dignitaries. Lastly, a key Imperial design flaw was also corrected in the new model. The command bridge, whose vulnerability was exposed with the destruction of the Executor during the Battle of Endor, was better protected, and the control systems were spread throughout different command stations aboard the vessel, which included an emergency bridge. The main bridge itself is still fitted out with pits for its crew members and large segmented transparent steel windows, though multiple command stations have been added to the walls of the bridge. Home of the First Order. Because the First Order in the years since its foundation hasn't established as many outposts as the Empire had commanded at the height of its power, the Finalizer was not built to be just a capital warship. It was also designed to be a carrier for the First Order ships, vehicles, and troops. The flagship of General Hux and Kylo Ren carries 2 wings of starfighters. Exact numbers are not known, but would include 150 TIE fighters if the First Order follows the Imperial standard of 72 fighters per wing, 100 atmospheric assault landers, and a full legion of stormtroopers. In line with the new operational standards and troopers, pilots and crew aren't simply posted around the Finalizer. It is the closest thing they have to a home. The ship is armed with more than 1,500 turbo lasers and ion cannons, not to mention its deadly ventral cannons and missile turrets. The aesthetic of the Finalizer's dark interior is purposely reminiscent of the Imperial military architecture that was found aboard the Emperor's capital ships and battle stations, such as the iconic Death Stars. Violation of treaties. Mission to find Luke. While it could be said that the New Republic never took the threat of the First Order seriously, General Leia Organa of the Resistance realized quickly that the vast new battle cruisers violated the treaties that had been signed between the New Republic and the Galactic Empire, forbidding the production of such warlike vessels. Nevertheless, reported sightings of Resurgent-class vessels were dismissed by some of the New Republic as resistance warmongering, but the First Order was indeed readying itself for a return to all-out war, and in the process of constructing its Starkiller base, the last mission to be accomplished before an assured First Order victory was to find and kill the legendary Luke Skywalker, the only person who could bring back the Jedi Knights and hope of a lasting peace to the galaxy. New design, part of our behind the scenes here. The Resurgent class is the latest in the wide array of Star Destroyers seen across the myriad of Star Wars productions, ranging from the iconic Imperial class of the original trilogy to the Republic's Venator class seen in the Clone Wars, and to the more niche Gladiator class seen in Star Wars Droids. James Cline, visual effects art director of The Force Awakens, said that it was fun to work on the new Star Destroyer because J.J. Abrams was so heavily involved in the art direction of the movie, coming up with ideas such as the new command tower. In July 2014, the final design of the First Order Flagship was set and ready to be digitally modeled by ILM. The Finalizer was included by Hasbro in their Micro Machines line as a small ship, as well as part of a transforming playset that came with mini figures of Kylo Ren and Finn. Awesome. All right. Lothal, the Jedi Outpost. Though the Jedi Temple on the Coruscant was known historically as the home of the Jedi Order, there were many smaller outposts spread across the galaxy. Some, such as the temple on Deveron, were large and set in plain sight. This would lead to their almost immediate destruction after Order 66 was issued. With the sites being closely monitored even after the structures were reduced to ruins, the temple on Lothal was used for specific training purposes rather than general use. This did not make it less significant than larger, better-known locations. Indeed, the tests and trials posed by outposts like the one on Lothal were perhaps of greater import, as they had a more lasting effect on the lives of the Jedi who passed through, but did afford it greater anonymity. As such, it and other outposts like it lasted longer after the rise of the Empire. Let's talk about the living force here, and then we'll go down. On their 2 visits to the Outpost Temple on Lothal, Kanan and Ezra were assailed by the apparitions crafted by the living force within the walls of the ancient structure. On the first occasion, Ezra bore the brunt of them, his fears and insecurities magnified and hurled at him, testing him to the point of destruction. In the most challenging of these, Ezra saw the Grand Inquisitor kill Kanan in a lightsaber duel. The victorious monster then turned his attention to Ezra, knocking him into a pit. It was all a vision designed to test the boy. On the second visit, it was Kanan who was sorely tested, battling 3 Inquisitors at once, succumbing to their combined fury. Rock Temple. On Lothal's northern reaches, in a place where snow lightly dusted the ground for most of the year, a tall rock spire, similar to those found all across the planet, thrust up out of the ground from a slight mound. Around it were smaller spires, etched into the ground. All around were concentric and radial lines that linked at circles filled with dimly seen swirling patterns. These were echoes, visual interpretations of the light and the dark sides of the Force, and only outward demonstrations that something was different about this otherwise unremarkable place. Gaining access. The temple itself, hidden deep within the ground, made no secret of how it should be accessed, provided one knew how to listen to the rocks. Together, and only together, a master and Padawan could use the Force to lift the temple entrance up from beneath the ground. When the temple rose upwards, rumbling and grinding, corkscrewing out of the ground, the entrance it presented depended on the needs of the Jedi. Whichever doorway supplicants used, there were at least 2 that Ezra and Kanan found. A jagged, threatening one that appeared first, and a squarer, more temple-like second. The tunnels and rooms within were a mixture of roughly hewn stone or intricately cut and lined chambers. Some areas were claustrophobic, others airy and open. As Jedi passed through these, it was never clear whether what they were seeing was real or an instructional illusion generated by the temple as part of a test. I'm going to go ahead and go through those voices and visions real quick. On first hearing the voice speaking in an unusual syntax, Ezra had no idea who it was he was hearing, assuming that it was part of another test the Jedi Outpost was setting him. Following the dancing light sent to guide his path, Ezra found himself in a new room, one that fell away to only be replaced with a starscape. There, Ezra spoke with Master Yoda for the first time. On his second visit, Ezra was brought to the same room. This time he saw a vision of Yoda as they spoke, a testament, he was assured, to his growing skills. Ahsoka and the Rebels. Ahsoka Tano, visiting the temple on the day the site was desecrated by the dark side, had reminded Ezra that outposts like the one on Lothal could be tricky. He needed little reminding. When he and Kanan had first come to the outpost, he had wandered, even fallen through endless tunnels to end up in a strange or familiar place. Strange or familiar places. Then, on their return with Ahsoka, Kanan had walked through a doorway only he could see, following a light only visible to him, and had vanished. Such was the way with the temple, and the will of the living force with which it resonated, at least until it dismissed. Oh, yeah, at least until its demise. Sorry. The end of the temple. The rebels' visit to the temple was to be the last. 2 pursuing Inquisitors forced the outpost to rise. The ground blazed red as the temple sought to protect those within, giving them time to escape, and delivering one last lesson, before the structure began to fall apart under the stresses caused by its violation. By the time Darth Vader arrived, the temple was inert, tumble-down relic of an age now lost to the dark side. Return of Oz. When Frank Oz returned to voice Yoda for the Star Wars Rebels Season 1 episode Path of the Jedi, executive producer Dave Filoni decided that it should only be his voice that was used in the temple scene on Lothal. I felt personally to keep Yoda as this disembodied thing, as it would confuse the audience less. I didn't want you to think Yoda could be teleporting from planet to planet, with the storyline surrounding the return of Ezra and Kanan to the Lothal Temple in Season 2, having established that Yoda was not there in person. Ezra's ability to see Yoda, as viewers saw him on screen, could be used to illustrate how Ezra had grown as a Jedi. Pretty interesting. Nice to know that they put like decent thought into it. Military Starship Classification Part 4. There was a certain stubborn pride to be found in those who crewed the starships of the picket lines. Their first job was dangerous enough: to scan for approaching enemy ships, a task that, in an age where electronic countermeasures and jamming gear could render scanning technology useless, often relied on little more than a good pair of eyes at a viewport. Things got no easier when battle had begun, when their role was, simply put, to make life really difficult for the enemy, giving their own capital ships freedom to slug it out for space supremacy from the line of battle. Picket line tactics. In the well-founded forces of the Republic and the Empire, the picket line was considered by some to be unnecessary. Close support vessels patrolling the outer edge of the sensor field often being deemed sufficient. Nevertheless, the use of a fast-moving line of small, agile craft, usually but not exclusively made up of starfighters, continued to prove beneficial. One tactic saw the picket line drop off on detecting an approaching enemy attack to allow fleets more heavily armed vessels do their job unhindered. Another saw the picket line hold fast, forcing the enemy commanders to second-guess their motives. Were they too slow or stubborn to withdraw, or did they hide a deadly secret, such as the modern vision of the fire ship, a remotely controlled freighter loaded with explosives that could be directed at a capital ship? Whether the picket line was a throwback to times long past or not, it remained a good way to disrupt an enemy or scatter their ships. Defense and offense. Starfighters could also help deal with certain ordnance. Large missiles could be intercepted and shot apart on approach, as could boarding craft. The latter could also be cleaned off a capital ship even after they had engaged, though doing so would look very uh, though doing so took very skilled piloting. Bombers presented another threat to be dealt with. Then, as well as tackling enemy craft, friendlies needed to be escorted to their targets to best deliver their lethal payloads. Lastly, of course, the starfighter pilots needed to deal with other starfighters. Then get back to the mess room to tell more exaggerated tales of uh, daring do. Okay, so Republic starfighters. In the very early stages of the Clone Wars, the Republic craft flown by clones often struggled to keep up, both with the Jedi and those who used their own starfighters, and more worryingly, their droid opponents. As a result, the V-19 Torrent and later ARC 170 starfighters were designed to be quick enough to outrun an assault and tough enough to soak up punishment that would have scrapped a droid starfighter. The Republic craft needed to deal out damage too. The BTL-B Y-wing was introduced to provide fast and sure bombing and missile capabilities, while the V-wing brought in towards the end of the war could keep up with Jedi and droid fighters and deliver significant blows to enemy craft. So this is the V-19 Torrent starfighter. And then we have the Alpha 3 Nimbus class V-wing starfighter, which we've already went through that one. This is the BTL-B Y-wing starfighter. You would recognize the Y-wing from Return of the Jedi, it would have been missing, and Empire or A New Hope, it'd be missing most of this. Basically, from like here back, all this shielding would be gone. Over the engine pods would be all gone. And then, of course, we have the ARC 170 starfighter here. Separatist starfighters. The Separatist Vulture droid, Tri-Fighter, and Hyena fighter bomber were all guided by integrated droid brains. Without having to worry about physical stresses on organic pilot, or even the basic comforts required, droid fighters could perform maneuvers organic pilots could not, making them exceptionally dangerous. However, droids were unable to react or to improvise on the way in the way the organic pilot could, meaning they had to be fielded in far greater numbers. The droid fighters were doubly dangerous to capital ships they faced. Without having to be concerned about the loss of experienced pilots, it wasn't unusual for CIS commanders to order their fighter craft to make suicide runs to destroy an enemy. This is the normal Vulture class here. This is the Hyena class droid fighter bomber, and then obviously this is the Tri-Fighter. You can see it's got 3 wings, so let me raise this up here. So I'll get this without let's see if I can get it here. There we go. So that's the normal Vulture class, and then we have the Hyena, and then that's the Tri-Fighter there. Alright, so that is all for starships and their classifications. That's everything for issue 77 now. Again, this was issue 77 was my 100th model video, so a bit of a milestone. So I was pretty proud of that. Next up is issue 78. Again, we're going to get some more parts that go and framework that goes on the sides of the mandibles, and then some more detailed parts. So we'll see what we're going to be putting on next time. All right, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching, and may the Force be with you always.